So David, what did you think of Raphy's strategy from my match yesterday?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, wasn't it? I mean, obviously it's proven strong and effective because otherwise he wouldn't have been able to win the match. But when looking back through the commentary, I was even missing a few things. It's a bit monomaniacal, I think is the phrase I gave for. He's going for all of these cards, but he seems obsessed to try and win it in one turn. It wasn't like, oh, I'm very strong here, I can buy 3-4 provinces. He wasn't even doing it at that stage, but I think it was kind of card dominated. Obviously, it was a little bit fast news. Game 2 was the big one. I mean, from what you were saying in the post-match interview, you felt like you were wanting to try and copy it, weren't you?
I quite like to start. Well, I sort of what I was feeling as the games were going on was that the longer the game went on, the better his hand was becoming, and my hand was kind of staying at about the same level, so I could try and take on more victory points. But it was kind of, I want to get this thing finished as soon as I can because he's building up and and my hand's not improving.
Well, I think this is actually the optimization race, which is always there. I mean, the main difference is for the normal strategy, I talked a little bit and some other things, or will do if they're not quite up yet, about the frequency which a card will come up if you buy it the first time. Now, typically, if you're just going for the money type strategy, buying victory points, you might see a card you're buying in the first round 6 times. Later on, it's like 2 times. But with this one, where he's got rid of every single card, such as even treasures or gold.
He sees every single card every single time.
So basically, when you buy a new card, it can come into play straight away, even later on. So this means if you lose your timing race from either a random variance or whatever, you're going to lose quite dramatically. Now, there were 3 key cards which came up into the different ones. I mean, you mentioned, I think, the trashing element, so that's one of them. You can perhaps list some of the other elements which need to be there. But effectively, it was, although it took him a while to get to this card, it was there was one which was groundskeeper, which basically allows him to build up like 10 points in one, where he again ended the game early. There was a merchant guild one where he built up lots and lots of coffers. I think Outpost was a bit critical for his timing on that one. That was game 2. That was the one which I felt, if you just were clinical in your buying, I think you would have put the game beyond him. And the third one was the replace, where he's got all these King's Courts. And I was kind of missing, because it's not so obvious from the spectator view, that he king to king and then king to king again. But kings cost 7 and provinces cost 8. So he would have just had so many victory points to be locked in if he just was buying victory points. It was just one of the ones where he was miles ahead. Anyway,
he seemed to not take on any, or not want to have coins at all. So he got rid of all his estates, all his coppers. But he was trashing silvers as well, and so he needed some of the action cards to give him either coins or coffers. He was using coffers quite a lot, so he needed that. He needed to trash. He needed to be able to cycle his deck, so get lots of cards. Needed actions, needed buys. So he needed a whole lot of stuff.
I mean, the other thing you see is to do this strategy, you need to buy out a lot of cards. So not only do you need the buy or the replace in order to get to the cards, it makes it quite vulnerable for ending the game early. Now, this is what he exploited in order to win it. You hadn't actually locked in your lead from the style of play. You're doing a couple of them. I think it's difficult in a match situation. Also, when he was
winning these games on like 7 victory points or something. It wasn't like high scoring.
Yeah, I mean, the provinces were still out there. I mean, normally, if you're doing an optimization strategy, you may be sitting on like 18 victory points and he's running to catch you up. Now, normally what you would see, the more standard way of this kind of approach is they do it a little bit slowly. So they will start, it's the hare and the tortoise thing. You're kind of running off to get all your points locked in, and they're slowly building up something which you get an absolutely massive lead. But if you look at the situation, if you were to get to 5 provinces and you haven't trashed your estates, or say you've trashed just 1 estate, he has to have trashed 3 estates for this strategy realistically. There are a few which you can kind of do it, but then it's not that big a difference. He now needs to catch up with more than 30 points. So you're looking, there's 3 provinces available, then he's going to have 4 duchies, and he's trying to do this in one turn, so he needs at least a 5th duchy. So this is 7 buys, which is required. And a lot of decks can't get that. So you need the buy card to be a useful buy card and not something which is going to stall your deck if he's trying to do it in that one. And there's also the other problem. I mean, I've had this a few times against Raphy where I've just been messing around. So I haven't stalled my deck. I haven't been interested in doing this. I'm just trying to see how many victory points I get. So if people were coming to this new Raphy is Lord Rashington, the Dominion's primitive AI, which is there mainly to keep you game. It's not awful, but it's there for you to feel good.
It definitely has gaps, doesn't it? So
yeah,
he's crashed you win nearly every game.
He crashed himself down to 1 card before now, which isn't even a victory point card. Yeah. So, but the point with these strategies are it can often go wrong. You can no longer catch up. You realise to the kind of buying thing, or another one. I even had one which kind of shows how your deck stalls was 150 points up and just no longer could end the game. 150 points is obviously a lot of points, but it's one of these ones where you just see, oh, if I bought all of the 10 groundskeepers and just keep going, how many points can I actually accumulate? But there is always this point where you need to accept you cannot do it. You cannot end the game in one turn, which was his strategy. Now, there is always a balance between the timing of things, and it's a question where the optimization is. And I think, yeah, it's like 10,000 games in a casino. If you're winning by 100 games, this is huge. But it also means that you're losing like 4,950 of these 10,000 games. So it's quite difficult to sometimes balance in something like this. What I find is when you stalled because there was the one where you kept getting 4s and you needed a 5, then you perhaps, I think, needed a silver instead of a port. But it was only because of the vampire worst boon it's a hex, worst hex which you got, which caused this. So whilst there are things to look at, I think it was perhaps an exaggeration of the things to see this. And yeah, as I say, this isn't to be critical of him. This is just our post-match analysis looking for weaknesses.
Yeah, well, I think we're trying to think how would we beat that strategy, right?
Yeah, but I think it doesn't really require a huge adjustment. You just need to lock in slightly earlier. I mean, what I would do is I would buy a duchy earlier. You establish your lead. If someone's going to this obsessive, going through these cards, you need to lock in some of your points earlier. There's no point in having this kind of extra protection of, oh, I want to get an extra province at stage X. You just need to lock in the points. I mean, even often.
I think you need to look at the cards that are there, and I know you've often talked about how many turns it takes to finish, and so looking at the different strategies, estimate how many turns it would take to finish doing a getting as many cards as you can strategy compared with building up provinces strategy, and then see which one is the faster.
Yeah, well, what tends to happen is because they're looking for an early finish, it can be a little bit complicated. But if you go rather than provinces, you need to basically be able to attach the either have the provinces locked in, so get to 5 provinces, or ideally 6. But six requires a bit of luck in the shuffle. You need to attack for duchy. So you're doing it a bit. You would accelerate your hand a bit with a duchy. You may get something like a groundskeeper or merchant guild, but you're not using it obsessively for this one. You just need to make sure you go to the biggest card and focus on it. So there was the crop rotation in one of the ones where I think if you just put everything in towards crop rotation, you would have been fine, but you were kind of trying to balance everything. So you're trying to get a nice balanced hand, and it doesn't work in this kind of situation. You need to sometimes just commit down to one thing, because otherwise you will rely on the distribution of the shuffle. There's no kind of counterplay. The problem is you don't tend to necessarily know their style of play to begin with, but yeah, locking in an earlier points lead when someone's going that obsessive, sometimes to be able to take out the entire duchy pile is the secret. You don't bother. It's like if there were dukes in the game. You don't bother that. But I think there are a lot of times where he would just flounder because the deck doesn't allow it, because he had trashing cards, he had replace cards, he's got active cards to run through it. Because even if you look at some, I mean, Groundskeeper, because it's +1 card, +1 action, that one's always going to be viable. But Merchant Guild isn't great. There's another card, Highway, which gives you +1 buy. It makes every coin cheaper. Actually, it may not be Highway. It may be I maybe think of the one which doesn't give a buy. But one of them can reduce the cost of everything, but doesn't give you a buy. So you can get a
Bridge.
province. Yeah, you
Bridge
get
gives you a buy. Highway doesn't give you a buy. Highway's
the one where you can reduce your if you're doing it excessively, you can reduce your province cost to 0. But if you don't have a buy, it doesn't really make a difference. If you've got 40 coins worth of cards in play, Bridge, it's great. Apart from the fact that you can't get that many into play without an action builder. Now, there are some combinations such as Capitalism. We'll look at some of these which let you get around it, but there are only a few cards which do this. I mean, obviously, trashing strongly is important, but it's a balance thing. We can go back to the base deck. Yeah. So this is my take on it. I wouldn't panic, but it does require fairly precise play, and you will lose a lot of times. And when you do lose to this strategy, it will be dramatic, but you win more times than you lose. I still think my take on this, but I think in the match situation, you missed a couple of opportunities, and he's obviously been playing this one strategy a lot. As I say, it could be like a showman's thing. It's like, I want to win in one turn, or it could just be that his strategy is just this. But there was certainly 2 or 3 times he locked in the game, but kept it more alive than it should have been because of this obsession for it. And there are other cards. If Magpie had been in the game, for example, it could be ending completely out of his control suddenly, because he needs to attack 2 decks down. Or if you kind of mirror him a bit, if you suddenly, So there are advantages to his one, but it is,
great. Well, it gives us some ideas of things to practice, and will be lots of fun. I'm going to practice against Raphy. I might even take you on pretending to be him and trying his strategy.
We'll have some more tutorials on this. We'll focus in on precisely why, precisely what. But the overview one is for when you can see what he's doing. It's like very obsessive. As I say, match 2 could have gone the other way if you are absolutely precise in your strategy. I think just having like the 20-point lead, you kind of took your foot off the accelerator a bit, not seeing the threat.
All right. Thank you for that analysis. And thanks everybody for watching.
Thanks everyone. So see you again soon.